This is PropertyBT, a podcast of BT correspondents.
Property valuation matters. What a valuer says is the value of a property can affect whether the government sells a land parcel, how much a home buyer can borrow, and whether a listed company can buy a property from a related party, and so forth. Are property valuations subjective? How accurate and reliable are valuations? Are properties in Singapore overvalued? Welcome to PropertyBT. I'm Leslie Yee, Senior Correspondent of the Business Times. Let's do a deep dive into the thorny subject of property valuation. My guest is KengChiam Tan, Executive Director of Consultancy Colliers. Welcome, KengChiam.
Thank you very much.
KengChiam, let's assume many listeners know very little about property valuation. How does one become a property valuer?
In Singapore, we do have a tertiary course in NUS, and it is actually a 5-year professional course that enable you to have all the knowledge to be able to understand the complexity of real estate issues to become a qualified valuer.
Sure.
Thereafter, so one has to actually work for at least 2 years to become a valuer. And that will be regulated under Singapore Institute of Valuers and Surveyors, SISV.
And what are property valuations used for?
The public may be engaging valuers to value the property for mortgage, sales and purchase, for statutory valuation, for taxation purposes, such as stamp duty, property tax, GST. And for the more complex ones will be land acquisition matters. One can represent either the state or the party being acquired. And for even more complex work that we do, we can act as expert witness in a dispute, be it divorce, company liquidation, and any other legal cases involving property values.
KengChiam, I guess property valuers do apply a lot of rigor to derive a property's value. However, sometimes when properties get transacted, prices can differ from valuations. Why is this the case?
When we do our valuation, we are guided by the professional standards issued by SISV, and we have to take the market view and not personal views. For instance, I am in urgent need of money. Because I need a fast sale to get my money, I'm prepared to discount it. On the contrary, if I think that this property is a special property that I can't find in the market, like staying near their parents, good school nearby, I'm prepared to pay above the market price. So these are factors that we do not really take into consideration. These are individual preference. Therefore, a valuer's job is not just looking at the screen like a reminder, reporting the prices. We have to interpret the market trend. In fact, we have to actually do our due diligence, check the properties, and price them accordingly.
Interesting. So you try to derive what is a fair value, something which is not too high or too low, right? I think for many home buyers, what is quite important is that when they get a loan, the bank also uses a certain valuation in terms of extending the loan to them. So do you think that in general, are property valuers engaged by banks to determine property valuers? Do they tend towards being conservative?
The bank engage valuers as a third and independent party to assist them in interpreting the values of the properties that are being transacted. So we hold the responsibility for writing the right numbers. Of course, there are challenges, especially when in a rising market, when the price rises extremely fast. That's where we should not be, following the market blindly. We should be the rational part of the market to determine the value of the property. But unfortunately, I think this is quite a shortcoming at the moment. The values work are not being reviewed or challenged in a rising market that is rising too fast.
So you're saying, in a rising market, sometimes the valuation, if it follows transacted prices, is a bit too high? Is that what you're trying to say?
I have been asked this question before. In a short span of time, why is it that nothing much changed, but values went up overnight by 10%, 20%?
Mm-hmm.
Especially our government has been very conscious that it has to be stable and rise according to economic growth to be sustainable. So we should not be, following the market blindly. We should be the one being the gatekeeper to do our work professionally.
I guess in a rising market, let's say I'm taking a loan, I am wondering why you cannot give a good valuation because prices are where they are, right? So why are you afraid to...
It's not that we're afraid. You see, the misconception about the market is that with every price point, valuers follow, which may not be sustainable. And that is partly because, although we are licensed, but we are not regulated. So at the moment, SISV is the professional body regulating us. However, I think as far as I remember, none of the value has ever been taken to task. So I think the regulation needs to be more strict, such that the prices will not run away like it should be.
Interesting. You express very noble sentiments. I think most practitioners probably like to have light regulations. Who wants to be more regulated, right? We talked about how you value a whole range of property asset types. I guess this also includes relatively newer asset classes like data centers. Do you think it is more challenging to value these newer property types, such as data centers, for example?
There are assets class like this where we need a lot of technical information to be able to do an accurate assessment. As you know, data centers, there can be multiple ways of selling the property. They can sell together with the operation. They can sell just the property itself. For instance, 110 Paya Lebar Road, they only sold the property. The tenant is the one who have upgraded the building into a data centers. So that transaction reflects the value of the bare shell, although it's already fitted out as a data centers. So one has to know the differences to be able to give a proper valuation.
Interesting. So it's always in the details, I guess. A bit like buying a home, whether the home came with the various fittings or not. And
on that note, the market should know that when we do our valuation, we have not seen the property. We just give the indication and the bank take that number and lock in the number in a letter offer. That's why we have to follow up with an inspection. I have experience of valuing a penthouse whereby there are some structures that are hidden at the rooftop.
Illegal structures.
Correct. We had to report to the bank, and then we had to take that in consideration, deducting the rectification cost of the property to reflect the true value of it.
So plenty of rigor put into the work. Also a lot of interesting type of valuations across a whole range of different properties. Still to come, are yields of Singapore properties irrationally low? Also hear what it takes to be a good property valuer. That's after the break.
Lens on Singapore is now bigger and better. The same deep dive exploration of socioeconomic and geopolitical issues which impact our lives here in Singapore and the region is now a video podcast. If watching a conversation is your thing, join Clarissa Montero in monthly conversations about things that matter. Subscribe to the BT Lens On playlist in the podcast tab of the Business Times YouTube channel and start watching today. BT Lens On Singapore, now available in audio and video.
And now, back to PropertyBT, a podcast of BT correspondents.
Welcome back to PropertyBT. Yields on many Singapore property types are low compared to various overseas markets. Think of getting a net yield of maybe around 3% for premier office spaces and 2% for homes. Yes, borrowing costs in some cases may exceed yield, and interest rates might not be coming down much further, and certainly not going back to the ultra-low environment that we had in the not-too-distant past. KengChiam, why are net yields of Singapore properties generally low? And is this irrational?
I have been questioned on this unique phenomenon in Singapore, and I would give credit to our government. In Singapore, because of our stability, the good governance, we are actually very much respected by people all over the world for our good town planning, good environment, and especially very safe environment. And from a risk and reward perspective, a 3% yield, it is actually a very good reflection of the premium that one put in a country with assets that is so well managed. This is something that you can't find all over the world.
So I guess it is shall I use the word Singapore exceptionalism that justifies why property cap rates, property yields are so low in Singapore, and there's a good basis for that. A widely used property valuation method is the income cap method. Here, a property's income is divided by the capitalization or cap rate to derive the property's value. The property value and the cap rates are inversely related. KengChiam, do you see cap rates for properties here expanding or contracting over the medium to near term?
I've been in the industry for 35 years and I've seen so many ups and downs, the AFC, GFC, SARS, and even COVID. I witnessed expansion of yield during the AFC and GFC because the demand for our property is not the same as before. It is a lot more recognized than it was during the AFC, GFC. And that's the reason why at that point in time, there were cap rate expansion. In fact, we were struggling during the COVID to convince investors that the cap rate should not be expanding. It should be the same or slightly higher.
Interesting. The AFC or Asian financial crisis in the late 1990s, GFC or global financial crisis in the 2000s, these were very tough episodes, but you're sort of saying that with the way we are going, maybe whatever crisis comes, you also do not expect cap rates to substantially expand, if at all, right? Investors should not be looking out for bargains in terms of Singapore properties. Perhaps some of our listeners may be inspired by your sharings to consider pursuing careers as property valuers. What does it take to be a good property valuer?
The issues that we are dealing with are from a political, economic, and social perspective. Liken that of a politician looking at the country. Therefore, I think we have to be conscious when we do our valuation to look at all these areas in order for us to make good judgment. For instance, in recent times when the market was buoyant, everybody were worried about cooling measures, and that actually tempered the market a little bit. As a valuer, I think we have to be sensitive to all these factors so that we will be able to assist in the good management of the assets of the people in the country.
In Singapore, there's a tight labour market as there are few babies and hence not enough young workers. KengChiam, is it difficult for the property valuation industry to attract young people?
There's a lot of lack of understanding about what we do, and that is the problem that we are facing. In fact, I was at our new school, which is NUS Business School. Our department is now within the School of Business. It was previously an independent faculty under the Building Estate Management. We have a serious problem. At the moment, the first year student, there are only 40 students. Our normal intake is more than 100. And it's really a concern that there will be less and less people wanting to work as valuers. In fact, we have a lot more foreigners coming into the industry.
So you certainly want more locals to step up and try to become property valuers. You have any ideas on how to better promote this industry?
It all starts with the school. NUS. And there are many of our local citizens who are not aware that there is such a course in Singapore. And it's quite disheartening to know that this is a profession which I believe is equally as good as a lawyer, doctor, or accountant. In fact, we are the one who hold the responsibility of writing values which are assets of Singaporeans and the country. We are actually gatekeeper of determining the wealth of every Singaporean in Singapore, including government. Therefore, I think we need a lot more publicity.
KengChiam, I certainly hear from you the urgent need and your passion in wanting to promote this industry, the importance of this profession. Thank you very much to my guest, Tan KengChiam of Colliers.
Thank you very much.
That's it for PropertyBT this time. Happy property hunting. Next week, BT Correspondents will be back with an all-new episode on markets, so do subscribe to our channel and check it out. If you have any thoughts or questions about the show, email us at btpodcast@sph.com.sg. I'm Leslie Yee. As always, thank you for listening. See you next week.
This is a podcast by the Business Times. Find more BT podcasts at businesstimes.com.sg/podcasts. Or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is meant to provide general information only. SPH Media accepts no liability for loss arising from any reliance on the podcast or use of third parties' products and services. Please consult professional advisors for independent advice.